I moved into my new home on Ashwood Lane in late September. The street was the kind you see in real estate brochures, lined with identical two-story houses, neatly trimmed hedges, and driveways where kids left their bikes toppled over like forgotten toys. It was quiet here, almost unnaturally so, and that was what I liked most about it. After years of living in noisy apartments, I wanted someplace peaceful, somewhere safe. The first week passed without incident. I met a few neighbors in passing, an older couple next door, a single dad across the street, and a young family with a toddler 2 houses down. Everyone was polite, though there was a kind of forced friendliness about it, as if they were trying too hard to seem normal. On the second Saturday, I found a flyer taped to my mailbox. Ashwood Lane Neighborhood Watch Monthly Meeting, Saturday p.m., hosted by the Myers. I decided to go. I figured it was a good way to meet more people, and honestly, I wanted to know who I was living around. The meeting was held at a beige 2-story house at the corner. Inside, about a dozen neighbors had gathered in the living room, sitting in a circle of mismatched folding chairs. A heavy-set man named Tom Myers ran the meeting, clipboard in hand. He smiled too wide, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Crime rates have been creeping up," Tom said, tapping his pen against the board. "Just small stuff. Car break-ins, packages stolen off porches. Nothing serious, but we need to keep our eyes open." People nodded along, murmuring agreement. But something about the way he said it bothered me. His eyes flicked toward the windows every few seconds, as though he was expecting someone out there, lurking in the dark. Afterward, I struck up small talk with a few neighbors. That was when I first met Margaret, the older woman from 2 houses down. She leaned in close, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. "Don't leave your curtains open at night," she whispered. Her breath smelled faintly of peppermint and coffee. "You never know who's watching." I gave a polite laugh, thinking she was joking, but her expression stayed completely serious. That night, I made sure to close my blinds before bed. Over the next week, I started noticing strange little details. Nothing alarming on its own, but, together, they unsettled me. A black sedan parked on the corner for hours at a time, lights off, engine running. Shadows moving behind neighbors' curtains long after midnight. Quiet conversations on front porches that stopped the second I walked by. One evening, while taking out the trash, I caught sight of something that made me stop cold. Across the street, in the single dad's house, the upstairs window was open just a crack. Behind the thin curtain, I saw a silhouette, broad shoulders, motionless, watching. When I looked directly at it, the curtain shifted slightly, as though someone had stepped back into the darkness. I stood there for a long moment, trash bag dangling from my hand, trying to convince myself I hadn't really seen it. Finally, I forced myself to look away and went back inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing faint sounds outside, subtle, irregular. The crunch of shoes on gravel, a low creak, like a fence gate opening. Slowly, I got up 3 times to check the windows, but saw nothing. By morning, I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Moving somewhere new always takes adjustment. That was what I kept telling myself, at least. The second neighborhood watch meeting was coming up next weekend, and I decided I'd bring it up casually. Maybe someone else had noticed the strange things too. But before I could, something happened that made me realize there was more to Ashwood Lane than anyone wanted to admit. The second neighborhood watch meeting was held at Tom Myers' house again. The mood in the room was different this time. People sat closer together, voices lowered, as though they were trying not to be overheard. Tom opened the meeting by reading out a short list of recent incidents. A broken porch light, a missing package, a car alarm triggered 3 nights in a row. Minor things, but his voice was tense, clipped, as though he was leaving something out. When the meeting ended, I hung back to speak with Margaret, the older woman who had warned me about keeping my curtains closed. "You ever notice anything strange around here?" I asked quietly. She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head, almost too quickly. "No stranger than anywhere else," she said, before walking away without another word. I stepped outside and immediately felt it. The street was quieter than usual. The meeting had run late, and most porch lights were off, leaving the entire block cloaked in shadows. A cold wind whispered through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and then fell silent. I started walking home, my shoes crunching softly against the pavement. That was when I saw him. Under a streetlight at the far end of the block stood a man. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes, his head slightly tilted. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, perfectly still, facing my house. I froze. For a few seconds, I told myself he was just another neighbor, maybe out for a late walk, but there was something wrong about the way he stood. His arms hung stiffly at his sides, and even from a distance, I could feel his gaze locked on me. I took a step forward, then another. I told myself I'd call out to him, ask if everything was okay, but the words stuck in my throat. When I reached the midpoint of the block, I glanced up again. He was gone. The streetlight flickered once, buzzing faintly, but the sidewalk beneath it was empty. There were no footsteps, no sound of retreating shoes, nothing. I walked the rest of the way home faster than I intended, locking the door behind me as soon as I stepped inside. My breathing was uneven, my palms damp. That night, sleep didn't come easily. At exactly 3:07 a.m., the doorbell rang. The sharp chime cut through the silence, jolting me upright in bed. Heart hammering, grabbed my phone and crept toward the front door, moving as quietly as possible. I didn't turn on any lights. Through the small peephole, I saw nothing. The street outside was empty. I waited, holding my breath, but whoever or whatever had been there didn't ring again. The next morning, I checked the security camera I had installed above the front porch. At 3:07 a.m., the recording showed the front yard clearly lit by the porch light. The frame stayed empty until the doorbell chimed. At that exact moment, the footage glitched, cutting to static for 5 seconds before returning. The camera never captured anyone leaving. I brought it up with Tom later that day, mentioning what had happened and asking if anyone else had experienced anything similar. He listened quietly, then put a hand on my shoulder. "You should stay inside at night," he said flatly, "and keep your curtains closed." I waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. He just turned and walked away. That night, I kept every blind in the house tightly shut. But around 2 in the morning, as I passed by the front window, I noticed something unsettling. The curtain wasn't perfectly aligned. Through a half-inch gap, I could see straight down the street. Under the same streetlight where I had seen the man the night before, someone was standing there again. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. This time, I was certain they were watching me. I barely slept after seeing the figure under the streetlight again. The next day, I tried to tell myself it was just a neighbor, maybe someone from the next block out for a late walk. But deep down, I didn't believe it. By evening, I had convinced myself to stay up late and keep watch. I brewed a pot of coffee, set my laptop on the kitchen counter, and opened the blinds in the living room just enough to see the street. Around 1:45 a.m., the street was empty, silent. Even the cicadas that usually hummed endlessly at night had gone quiet. That silence carried a weight, pressing against my ears. At 2:03 a.m., the porch light flickered. I turned toward the front window immediately. Beneath the light, directly at the edge of the yard, I saw a shadow. It wasn't the figure from before. It was smaller, thinner, hunched slightly forward like a child trying to hide. I leaned closer, squinting through the blinds. The yard itself was empty. The shape was there though, perfectly outlined in the glow of the porch light, its edges trembling slightly, as if distorted by heat. My chest tightened. The shadow was moving, but nothing was there to cast it. I grabbed my phone and switched to the live feed from my security camera. The front yard looked normal, perfectly still, except the footage was slightly lagging half a second behind real time. On the screen, the shadow under the porch light stretched unnaturally long, twisting at sharp angles before vanishing altogether. Then, a knock echoed from inside the house. I froze, heart hammering. It came from the hallway leading to the back door. 3 slow knocks, spaced evenly apart. I crept toward the sound, trying not to breathe too loudly. When I reached the hallway, I stopped, straining my ears. The house was silent again. I turned on the hallway light. The back door was locked, deadbolt secure. That was when I heard the creak of my front porch. I spun around and ran to the living room window. Someone was standing directly under the porch light. It was the man I had seen before, the tall one, motionless, arms stiff at his sides. I didn't think. I yanked open the front door, stepped outside, and shouted, "Who are you?" The cold night air rushed against my skin, carrying the faint smell of wet grass and damp soil. The figure didn't move. I stepped closer, my bare feet scraping against the concrete. "Do you need help?" I called out again, louder this time. As I took another step forward, the porch light above me flickered violently and went out, plunging everything into darkness. When the light came back on less than a second later, the man was gone. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping on the threshold as I scrambled back inside and locked the door. My breathing was ragged, my hands shaking. I checked the security footage again, desperate for answers. The camera had captured something, but not what I expected. At the exact moment the porch light flickered, the figure blurred, its outline dissolving like smoke, leaving the frame completely empty. That night, I hardly moved from the couch. I kept every light in the house on and sat facing the front window until dawn. The following morning, I decided to talk to someone. I knocked on Tom Meyer's door, hoping for answers. He opened it halfway, blocking my view of the inside. "You've been seeing him, haven't you?" he asked, his voice low and flat. I froze. "Who?" Tom glanced around the street, then leaned closer. "The man under the light. We all have." Before I could ask what he meant, he stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind him. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice even further, "you need to keep your doors locked, your windows covered, and your porch light on. Don't try to talk to him. Don't acknowledge him. And whatever you do, never let him see you watching." I stared at him, speechless. "Why? Who is he?" Tom didn't answer. He just shook his head slowly and walked back inside, closing the door firmly behind him. That night, I left my porch light on, blinds drawn tight. I thought I was being careful. At exactly 3:14 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my door creaking open downstairs. I jolted awake to the creak of my front door. For a few seconds, I lay perfectly still, listening. My room was dark, and the faint hum of the ceiling fan did nothing to drown out the sound below. The door hinges groaned again, followed by a soft, deliberate click. Someone had closed it. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside the bed and tiptoed to the top of the stairs, straining to hear any movement. The house was silent. My throat was dry, my grip tightening on the bat until my knuckles ached. I made my way down, one slow step at a time, every creak of the stairs sounding louder than it should. When I reached the bottom, I flicked on the hallway light. The front door was locked, deadbolt secure. Nothing seemed out of place. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, bat in hand, trying to convince myself it had just been the wind or the house settling. But deep down, I didn't believe that. The next evening, around 11:40 p.m., my phone rang. The number was blocked. I hesitated before answering, pressing the phone to Meyer slowly. "Hello?" I whispered. Silence. I waited, listening for background noise, breathing, anything, but there was nothing. After 30 seconds, the line clicked and disconnected. I brushed it off as a prank until it happened again the following night. And the night after that. Always around the same time. Always from a blocked number. Always silent. On the fourth night, I answered on the first ring, my voice shaking. "Who is this?" I thought I heard breathing. Slow, shallow, close to the receiver. Then the call ended. By the fifth night, I stopped answering, but the phone kept ringing. 3 calls, 4 calls, 5, each one lasting longer than the last, as though whoever it was knew I was listening. I decided to check my security cameras again, scrubbing through the footage from the previous nights. At first, nothing stood out. But then, at exactly 3:14 am, the same time I had heard the door open, I saw something. In the grainy night vision, the front door eased open by itself, just a few inches before stopping. No one entered, no one left. The following morning, I called Tom, desperate for answers. "You need to leave the house tonight," he said without hesitation. Stay somewhere else. I swallowed hard. Why? What's happening? Tom lowered his voice. You're not the first person on the street to have this problem. The calls, the noises, the shadow. It starts the same way every time. Starts? I repeated. What do you mean starts? But Tom refused to explain further. He told me to pack a bag, said he would come by after dark to check on me, then hung up before I could protest. That night, I tried to distract myself by keeping the TV on and every light in the house burning. At 12:02 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, the call lasted longer. I put it on speaker and set the phone on the coffee table, my hands trembling. For nearly a full minute, nothing but silence filled the room. Then, faintly, I heard it, a whisper, so soft, I thought I imagined it. I see you. The call ended immediately after. I jumped off the couch, my heart pounding, and ran to check the locks again. Everything was secure. The windows were latched. The doors were bolted. That was when I heard it. Upstairs, a single, heavy footstep directly above me in the hallway outside my bedroom. I stood frozen in my living room, staring up at the ceiling. The single, heavy footstep above me echoed in my ears long after the sound had faded. My bedroom was directly overhead. Forcing myself to move, I gripped the baseball bat tightly and climbed the stairs one careful step at a time, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. When I reached the top, the hallway stretched out before me, lit only by the faint glow of the nightlight plugged into the wall. I turned toward my bedroom. The door was slightly open. I was certain I had closed it earlier. I pushed it open slowly, the hinges whining softly. The room looked normal at first glance. The bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn tightly shut, and everything appeared untouched. But the air felt wrong, stale, heavy, like the aftermath of someone else's breath lingering in the room. I stepped inside, scanning every corner, checking the closet, even crawling halfway under the bed. Nothing. I stood up, gripping the bat, so tightly my hand ached. Then, from downstairs, my phone rang again. I rushed back down, snatched it off the table, and answered without thinking. Who is this? I demanded, my voice cracking. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then, the same soft whisper came through the receiver. Behind you. I spun around instantly. No one was there. The call ended. My body shook violently as I grabbed my keys, deciding right then that I needed to leave the house. I ran to the front door, unlocked it, and yanked it open. Tom Myers was standing on my porch. I gasped and nearly swung the bat before he raised his hands. Easy, he said quickly. Pack a bag. You have to come with me right now. What's going on? I demanded, my voice trembling. Tom glanced over his shoulder, scanning the empty street. We tried to warn you, he said. You've seen him now. He won't leave you alone. Shook my head, gripping the doorframe for balance. Who is he? What does he want? Before Tom could answer, a loud, sharp creak came from the side of the house, like someone stepping onto the gravel path. Tom's expression hardened. Stay here, he whispered, stepping off the porch and disappearing around the corner. I waited, every muscle in my body coiled tight. Seconds passed. Then a muffled shout erupted, followed by the sound of running footsteps. I backed into the living room and locked the door, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. The house was silent again. I turned toward the front window, pulse racing. The curtains were still drawn, but the faint glow from the streetlight outside spilled in around the edges. Slowly, I reached out and pinched the fabric, pulling it back just enough to see outside. Under the streetlight, the tall man stood perfectly still, his head tilted slightly upward, staring directly at my window. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over the coffee table. My chest burned, my breath shallow and fast. I turned toward the staircase, thinking I could grab my bag and leave through the back door instead. That was when I heard another sound. From upstairs, the floorboards creaked. Then another step, and another. I froze, my body refusing to move. I had checked every room, every closet, every corner. There was no way someone had been upstairs, yet the footsteps grew louder, deliberate, until they stopped just outside my bedroom door. I tightened my grip on the bat and forced myself up the stairs, one step at a time, the sound of my breathing deafening in my ears. The hallway stretched ahead, dark except for the faint nightlight glow. The bedroom door was now wide open. I stepped inside, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst, and reached for the curtains, needing to see outside. I yanked them apart. The streetlight was empty, but in the reflection of the glass, directly behind me, stood the tall man. I spun around, bat raised high, but the room was empty. The phone rang downstairs. Once, twice, 3 times. I forced my legs to move, stumbling down the stairs and grabbing the phone off the table. I pressed it to my ear, shaking. This time, there was no silence, no whisper, just breathing. Long, steady, right behind me, turned slowly toward the window. The curtains were open, and from somewhere deep inside the house, I finally heard the voice clearly. "I told you not to watch." The line went dead.